Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this video. This is a review of the Maudsley Deprescribing Guidelines book that came out in early 2024. It's concentrating on the benzodiazepine section, but also the general section and some of the antidepressant section. It also includes some of my past experience with Dr. Mark Horowitz and his lectures in the past that cover a lot of what's discussed in this book when it comes specifically to benzo withdrawal and safe tapering. If you are in withdrawal and experiencing difficulty understanding this video, especially the math bit, that's completely understandable. And I highly urge you to have a family member or a friend who is good with mathematics to a high school level and has a clear, unbothered mind to see this video with you and also maybe alone and help you understand it or advocate for you if required. If you are in withdrawals, please be kind to yourself. Some parts can be triggering, especially if you rely on this book. Please note that you can contact me if you have any questions or if you need support. If you are watching this and you are Mark Horowitz, which I asked to watch this video, please watch this all the way as well, despite it being understandably critical of the work. I would also like to mention that I do appreciate a lot of things in the book, and it's very existence to start with. And I will talk about the positives of this book, just as well as the negatives. In fact, that will be the first part of this video. Before we do that, just want to mention that the background of my contact with Mark since June 2023. I've known about Mark Horowitz's work since then, since I saw basically the Zoom lecture he had with Benzo Warriors back in, like I said, June 2023, where I was in severe withdrawals and I needed help. It was very enlightening, and I think everyone who watched it in the groups felt finally someone made serious study and is helping on that academic level rather than us helping each other, which was very good and very informative. And looking at this again for the purpose of this video and looking back at my emails with Mark, I realized how confused I was with the withdrawals and didn't really understand things as much as I do now, which is why I also encourage people that are in withdrawal to look at this video and not feel that they're completely dumb or something like that. It's even if you're educated and understand mathematics and all of that, it's not going to sometimes help you when you are in withdrawal. Basically, now that I'm fine and I'm healed from the withdrawals, and my brain is working again, and I start to use it a lot more. I'm more and more thankful, actually, that I didn't understand everything back in the day and created my own exponential adjustable and precise tapering tool. The link is in the description. I do think that, and you will see why I get to this conclusion at the end, that it's way more precise. I have sent Mark questions about, after watching this video back in mid 2023, I asked him questions about those things, and we had discussions back and forth about some of this. I will talk about it more in the receptor occupancy part of this video and the CBD section. I want to mention that in some ways, Mark disappointed me in our conversations by giving or not giving answers to certain questions that I had. I will mention this. I contacted him not as a researcher back then, of course, but as a person going through the hell of withdrawal and basically begging for help. So there is a bias there. But if he allows, I did ask him for it. I will include in this video our email conversations in full. Otherwise, I'll just mention certain things. This, I just want to be very clear, this has not altered my objectivity when making this video. I'm doing this video purely from an academic point of view because I'm looking for ways for people to not go through what I did, or at least minimize any suffering they might endure in the tapering process. Otherwise, I wouldn't even review this book. Some background about myself. I am not a doctor. I'm not a scientist in the narrow sense of the word, as in a person who does experiments and research and write papers and sits in a lab. However, I do have a Bachelor of Computer Science major and mathematics minor that I acquired back in 2002 from Bar-Ilan University in Israel. I have worked as a senior business intelligence expert for at least 12 years and as a programmer for over 20, and analyzed, transformed, and stored data for a living on a day-to-day basis. Tip, I guess, before we continue, is if you can watch the YouTube video that he made with Benzo Warriors. Like I said, I have a link before you watch this video. And I think this is important because it covers a lot of what you'll actually read in the book. I haven't seen very big differences, and can, or at all, in fact, and it can replace it in many ways. So I will have the link in the description. It's, I think, about an hour. He explained receptor occupancy, the hyperbolic taper idea, which is based on receptor occupancy, and compared it to exponential tapering, which is, for example, 10% of the previous dose, which was is still the advice given by NICE in the UK and in general in the groups as well, which is basically exponential tapering, which is what my tool is based on. Now, with all that being said, I will start by giving an overview of the book, what kind of information it contains, the different chapters. Then I'm going to talk about the good things in this book and why it is important that it's out. I will then dive into sections and parts that I find confusing or potentially rushed, or important aspect completely missing from the book. Please note that I will use the abbreviations of Benzos for benzodiazepines, RO for receptor occupancy, and AD for antidepressants. Okay, so let's start with the structure of the book. So as you can see, you have basically a table of content, and from the table of content, you'll be able to see there's a lot of information. He goes through, first of all, an introduction in chapter 1, which covers generally like the idea of tapering and prescribing and deprescribing psychiatric drugs in general, and everything you want to know. There's a lot of information here. You can see here through this, there's a lot of stuff. And then you basically get into chapter 2, which is the antidepressant section. He does repeats a lot of stuff from the first section, I assume because he understand that people won't read the whole thing. It is a very big book. It's 580, I think. Yeah, 569 pages, according to my Kindle. So yeah, that's a very big book, but everything he talks about, he gives a lot of information, a lot of research, gives statistics that don't exist in other things, and so on. And so yeah, there's a lot of stuff that is specific for antidepressants. And then and you can see that he also does for each one of them, a whole chapter. And then chapter 3 is for the benzodiazepines. Again, he's going through the same things that he went through chapter 1, plus a lot of things that are specific for this class of drugs. And he goes through all the benzodiazepines covered. He actually says, I think in the preview, that he's going to cover things that are not only prescribed in the UK, but around the world, because there are drugs that are not used in the UK, but he understands that this book might be used and should be used, I guess, all over the world, and so he uses, he includes those things as well. And then the chapter 4 is self-prescribing of gabapentinoids, and again, a lot of information for specific ones. Well, in this case, it's gabapentin and pregabalin, I think that's how you pronounce it. So those are just 2 drugs, but they are, people will tell you it's a lot like benzos in the fact that you need to taper them off, and they have similar side effects when you do. And now let's talk about the good things about this book, which will mention those things as well. So first of all, like I said, it's comprehensive. There's a lot of topics that are covered. Mark is covering what is hyperbolic tapering, what led him to use this method, the difference between exponential tapering and hyperbolic, which can be confusing, was confusing for me as well. He covers akathisia, He mentions other drugs that can be recommended or not to help people in this situation, but it's a very short section. Every drug has 3 tapering tables, basically, with different speeds. And it is what I like about each drug, especially, by the way, in the antidepressants, is that it has a lot of information about this drug specifically, including studies and things of that sort. For example, I read the paroxetine section because that's a drug that I need to taper later, I guess, after I'm recovered fully and had some time for my system to adjust to coming off the clonazepam. And it says that it's one of the most problematic drugs to taper, so that's fun. But I'll have to take this into account. So and it brings studies and things of that sort, and shows specific things about specific drugs. So that's really, really good, in my opinion. He talks about, for example, how different antidepressants target different receptors in the brain and in the CNS in general. So it's very good in that regard. In my opinion, the antidepressant section seems even more comprehensive than the benzo one. And like I said, well, I didn't say, but I'll say it now. I think the Mark Horowitz, his problem was with SSRIs. That was his crisis, I guess, taking and coming off SSRIs while he was studying. He had a horrible withdrawal. And so, I assume, again, I'm not saying that that's maybe why it's so comprehensive, even though, like I said, the benzo section is comprehensive as well. The other thing that could be considered to be, I'll challenge that in the other section of this video, but using the RO percentage. The receptor occupancy is something Mark explains how different doses of the drug work in a hyperbolic way on the receptors of the brain. And basically, very small doses of the drug have a much bigger accumulative effect on the receptors than higher doses. In the benzo section, he uses a study done on monkeys to calculate their receptor occupancy. This was not something that was used in the past, as far as I know, and in theory could be a bit more accurate than exponential tapering. He actually mentions that they're very, very close. It's actually and that's why exponential tapering works. But he basically detailed and is longer with the exponential tapering. But we'll get to that in the other section of this review. So stick around to hear about that. That's really important. But it does talk about that, and that's something novel and a good thing, a good discussion. And I don't think there are studies on receptor occupancy with human beings. So this is the closest we can get. And I admit I tried to read the study that he linked, but it's using neuroscience jargon that I don't completely understand. However, there was a serious error, in my opinion, here. And like I said, and we'll talk about it in the other section where I'm being more critical of things. The statistics are very important. Mark brings a lot of statistics that can be very interesting. For example, he talks about how many people even experience withdrawal symptoms if they are, I assume, from what I read, being abruptly stopped or from taking this drug, which is also being cold turkeyed for both benzos and antidepressants. And like I said, a lot of the studies are presented. He even has a table for what antidepressants are worse or better, like I said before, worse or better withdrawal symptoms. So it goes in a table from 1, from little or no withdrawal symptoms, drugs like agomelatine, which I used to take, and 4 for the higher chance of severe symptoms if stopped without longer-taper paroxetine in this case. Maybe the most important thing is that I think the number one thing for everyone in our community is that this is a book that you can take to your doctor. Basically to your not so benzo wise doctor, and show the recommendations to stop the drug in a month with simple cutting of a pill is dangerous. So that's really important. Being a part of the Maudsley series gives it a prestige to this book, and doctors and psychiatrists who don't know what they are doing or are too arrogant to admit that they don't know what they're doing, uh, will look at this and say, okay, well, this is talking our language because it's a book, it's a psychiatric book, so with from Wiley, so it should be true and correct. That's a problem too, and again, but for at least for this, it's better than what we had before. Um, and it is being promoted by Mark himself, seriously promoted. I see so many videos. If you look for his name on YouTube, you'll find so many, lectures that he did, webinars and things like that. And it was actually, there was a virtual conference with the RICGP in Australia and both QLD and New South Wales departments of health, I think, or GPs have adopted it. Instead of the old, let's just take a quarter of the pill every day or every week or something and hope for the best, or take it once every 2 days instead of one, which is dangerous for a lot of drugs. So that's really important in that regard. However, and now we're getting into the problems with this book, and the reason why I'm making this video really is that the Kindle version, first, we'll start with the basic stuff that is just problematic, and we'll go into what I think is the number one problem. So let's start with the basic. The Kindle version, which I downloaded and bought, is making reading the tables hard. In the Mac version of the Kindle, it's completely cut in some places. The apps, by the way, between PC and the Kindle version, I guess the Kindle app is completely different between PCs and the Mac. I didn't even compare it to like looking at it on mobile. But I assume that if someone was watching, reading it, he would use a PC just to, to see those tables properly when he's doing cuts. So it's rendered differently. And on the Mac, the tables are almost unreadable and are cut in the middle in some cases. And even when I try to change the side of the text and things like that, it doesn't help. On the PC, because the way that they formatted it, the tables are cut in the middle and are side by side. Going to the next page is very confusing. So it makes it really hard to understand and read, and even for me, especially since the steps go down in each table instead of the more natural 1, 2, 3, 4 if you put side by side tables. Given that this is an electronic version, I don't understand why those tables are not just, going through, not side by side, but just as the pages go, and just spanning pages, because there's no waste of paper, I assume. It's very important that the tapering plans would be as easy to read as possible. So that's a big problem in my opinion, because people are already in withdrawal and are, even reading something can be very difficult, and you want to make it as easy as possible for them to read it. Okay, the book disclaimers. There's a lot of, messages that I understand that are like for legal reasons at the beginning, but they don't give you a lot of confidence reading this book. The context of this work are intended to further general scientific research, understanding, and discussion only, and are not intended and should not be relied upon as recommending the promoting scientific method, diagnosis, or treatment by physicians for any particular patient. That's exactly the opposite of what this book is for. We can basically close this book now and say, okay, it's not for us. I mean, I don't understand this. I understand that this is a legal advice, because once you put it in, you would think that people can, like, if the people are harmed by this book, would, they can just say, oh, we didn't never intended your physician to use it as a tapering tool. Now, here's another section. We do not claim that this advice is necessarily correct, in quotes, and that it deserves greater prominence than the guidance provided by other professional bodies or special interest group. Again, sort of like, this is supposed to be the official advice. So is it official advice, or is it, or or it's not. I don't understand from this section. And then the other one is users of the Deprescribing Guidelines should also bear in mind that the content of this handbook is based on information available to us in November 2023. Much of the advice contained here will become outdated as more research is conducted and published. No liability is accepted for any injury, loss, or damage, however caused. I think that no liability is accepted for any injury, loss, or damage, however caused, would have been a better disclaimer than all of this until now, because you should have confidence that what you're offering to people is important. But I also put a disclaimer and saying like giving the limitations of what I do or don't do is and I don't want to I don't take liability, because like I said, I'm not a doctor, but it doesn't mean that I don't believe in what I'm saying, and I didn't honestly went through and think this is the right thing to do. I just say that I am not XYZ, and I do think, and even if I said something is 100% true, as we know, some people don't have withdrawal symptoms. Some people are like just take it for 5 days and have like 3 years of tapering. So it's just unknown. So you can say for 1%, but I think that this should have been the only disclaimer, but that's just me. He also mentions that some of the most of the contributors of the prescribing guidelines have not received funding from pharmaceutical manufacturers for research, consultancy, or lectures. Although some have. There's only 2 on the book, so I'm not sure what, probably talking about references to other research that he mentions, or the people that helped him in writing this book. Readers should be aware that these relationships inevitably color opinions on such matters as drug selection or preference. I don't agree with that. I think that a health professional should stay impartial and give the right advice, no matter who's paid his salary. Maybe I'm naive, but that's what I think. However, in the case of a textbook that advises on stopping psychiatric drugs and that generally recommends not using medications to treat withdrawal from another, such conflicts may be less that's fine, permanent than other circumstances. As regards the direct influence, no pharmaceutical company has been allowed to view or comment on any drafts of proofs of the prescribing guidelines, and none has made any request for the inclusion or omission of any topic, advice, or guidance. To this extent, the prescribing guidelines have been written independently of the pharmaceutical industry. Okay, so that's good. There are trivial errors that should not be in this book that make me question if it was properly proofread or was peer reviewed or anything like that. For example, in 2 tapering tables, the alprazolam and clonazepam, the difference between the 2 steps, at the beginning of the taper, is higher than Mark's indication on the up to RO% occupancy drops between steps section. So I have not checked all of the tables, but those 2 are immediately a problem. I think I might have seen it in other places too, but I'm not sure. So I'm not going to say. The fact that it's on 2 tables already, and also in his lecture, I'll play it now for you.
So I'm writing a textbook on how to stop benzodiazepines aimed at doctors. And this is an example of what I'm going to call a fast regime. So I'll just show you what you're looking at here. These are different steps. It's in 2 blocks. So once you've done step 12, you go to step 13. This is starting. So this is, I haven't labeled it very well. This is 60 milligrams of diazepam. And this is the effect on the brain that it has. So basically, each of these steps is the same size in terms of effect on the brain. It's all about 2.5% effect on the brain of GABA, approximately.
So before we dive into the actual problem of what's wrong with the tapering tables, I want to take you back for a second to my uni years. In high school, before uni, when I had a test in mathematics or other, things like that, or even science, the answer would usually be a number that is easy to digest. So like something like 50 or 100 or 1, a whole number, or maybe with fractions that are pretty, like 1 divided by 2, or, like 3/4 or something like that, right? When you're in uni, that stops being the case. You are dealing with numbers that have a lot of, 4.33467 would be a number, or even infinite, numbers after the decimal point. And so it's completely different. And one of the courses that I had to do was basically teaching us how to be a Casio calculator, when it's called numerical methods. And basically, we had all the formulas that were taught in class available for us in the test. So you would think that would be very easy, just follow the formulas and get to the answer. But it's not easy, because you have your Casio calculator and you calculate, and the numbers that you get as a result for each step are ugly. Now, you need 60 or 65 to pass the test. So it was very easy to fail over trivial errors. There's 4 questions, 3 hours to do it, and 45 minutes per question, and you miss one bit or another bit, you get it wrong you typed it wrong on the calculator, and the whole question is gone. And it's how science works, though, and how I understand why the professor didn't listen when I begged him basically to get another 5 points so I'll pass my second exam. I was really scared I would fail the third time, and I have to take the course again then, and basically delay my dream of leaving Israel and study in another country, or moving to another country, and I had to study another year, and all of those things were on the line. And everyone thought that the math bit is stupid and that existed just to fail us, basically, because as a programmer, you rarely deal with those things unless you program a 3D game where algebra and physics and all those things are important. Although today everything it would be just a simple programming command away in Unreal Engine or something like that, because this has been fixed, I guess, for the everyday person. That's why general IT degrees exist in other countries. But he was teaching me math, science, and that's how our brain works. It doesn't understand pretty numbers. And this is how physics works, and this is how money and business works. No one rounds a number, if more than, I guess, like a few cents. When he goes to the bank, if the bank took 10 cents out, you'll be enraged and you'll be like, but it's only 10 cents. But it accumulates, and it becomes more and more and more, and before you know it, by the end of the year, you $100 less in the account. Now, in medicine, this can be the difference between life and death. In some cases, that's exactly what it is. And I'll give you an example. I used to work for Baxter in Sydney, and it's one of the largest and most important healthcare companies in the world, and they're the inventors of IV. And one of the things that they do is medicine for people that are going through chemotherapy. And they have a huge clean room where people covered head to toe, and basically very precise machines that cost money that most of us will never see in our lifetime are making very precise drugs, very precise amounts of each component, specifically for each person that gets it, basically when they go through chemotherapy, because it's life and death. And so I was very confused as to why a scientist and someone who knows firsthand how even a fraction of a percent difference between proportional cuts can affect someone. People are very sensitized, and he talks about it in his book as well. While trying to think of a good reason to do it, though, I was shocked to finally find the truth from what I think it is, and that I could not find the most important, accurate, and most popular method of all to do tapering. Basically a scale with when you shave and you crush the pills. That's what everyone's using for tapering. Well, not everyone, but most people, that's what they do. This is one tool that is so important for proper safe taper, the milligram scale, the jeweler scale, that you can easily get it for like $15 or up to $30 US dollars on Amazon or eBay, and you get a pretty good accuracy from that scale. Surprisingly so. I suspect this is the original sin kind of thing for this book that I believe created the main issue for all the taper tables in this book. They are just not accurate. They're not accurate at all. Because instead of using a proper calculation with ugly numbers, going back 5% or 10%, even using the RO tables that he have, the only advice he gives is to use tablets and cut them in halves and quarters, and move into a liquid solution that may or may not be even exist commercially, and even then cutting the dose in a linear fashion until you reach some threshold. So all the thresholds are pretty numbers too. Like 20 milligrams of diazepam, then you start to taper a little bit slower, and so on and so forth, when the cuts become smaller, basically. And not only does it look completely different from the smooth hyperbolic function he shows for every benzo and antidepressant, the RO percentage jumps are all over the place, as you can see here. In clonazepam, for example, it goes all the way from 1.2% to 2.8% RO. He also dismisses the fact that a pill cutter will never be 100% accurate. He mentions it, but in my experience, it's even much less accurate than maybe what he assumes, when you put it on the scale. By saying that while he is aware that it's not accurate, over time it balances because that creates waves, because you're using half one day and the other half in the other day. But it creates waves in the plasma concentration of the benzo or the AD in your blood, and something you want to avoid. This also creates a problem when some drops he has different amounts for AM and PM doses, something that people say never do. Like, in lorazepam, for example, at some stage you are taking a very different dose for morning and night compared to afternoon. And that can definitely create a huge difference, since the half-life is only 8 hours. So maybe for clonazepam, it's a bit more forgiving since the half-life is 20 to 60 hours, but it's completely unnecessary. With a proper calculation, like you can do with my Google Sheet solution, or with like a calculator and a diary, you'll be okay. Another issue that was when he describes micro-tapering, he also says to basically create linear cuts between cuts. But you can't do that without a scale. When you're doing quarters of a pill, basically, you create more problems than basically every eighth of a pill will be a bit different because you can't calculate the weight properly, and shave it to the right weight. And maybe with diazepam tabs it's a bit easier, but still, it's the same problem. The fast, moderate, and slow tapers plants also have very different maximum receptor occupancy percentage because of it. So what's fast for clonazepam would be different from diazepam, even though if you compare them to each other, you really want to maybe keep a 5% receptor occupancy difference between cuts. He's also using the word up to, which is a little bit like like I just showed, it's up to, but it's not even close to the up to figure. Like up to 2.5, it's not, it's 1.2 at some scale, some in the beginning. So it's not even similar. So it's all over the place. And I assume because of the limitations of using pills without a scale. Now, let's talk about these RO percentage, differences. He brings two studies. And in at least one case, he references one that is using triazolam tested on monkeys, even though he talks about diazepam, receptor occupancy percentage. And this reminds me of another problem. His references in many cases, studies that he conducts himself that are not even published at the time of the book came out. In other cases, he references other sources that he wrote. It seems like he's basically bringing his own things to the table. In some cases, they're not even available to be read. Now, I admit that the triazolam study that he mentions was very difficult to read and understand for me, and uses neuroscience lingo again that I don't understand as someone not in this field. So I can only basically take his word that his RO calculations are correct. However, like I said, he puts it there, but a lot of it is mostly diazepam. basically many of the tables, if not all, in the benzo sections are based on the diazepam study. At least that's what he says, right? But I want to remind you that benzos can be very different from each other in the effects of the brain, not only in the half-life, which is very important, but also in the metabolites that it creates. For example, diazepam specifically has a very long half-life, partially because it metabolizes into other benzo metabolites that stay in the blood longer. So it works differently from other benzos. And so using this does not really cover, even though like in every place he would say, I've used the diazepam to convert, I guess according to the, to the conversion tables that Ashton herself, I assume, wrote, he puts it in a lot of his references. So I can just, basically I can say that just converting ROs between benzos would be accurate. And it shouldn't be assumed. And now is the biggest problem, right? We are not monkeys. Does the diazepam, I think it was done on baboons, and we are not baboons, and we are not the same. And some people can, and also between ourselves, right? Some people can stop taking benzos or antidepressants or other drugs without experiencing any withdrawal symptoms. I tapered my sertraline in a month and a half linearly, basically from the highest dose, so 200 milligrams, I think. I'm not sure if it was 150, but I was going up and down also in dose with no side effects, nothing else. And when I stopped, I basically had a week of restless leg syndrome for like just when I went to bed, when I was in bed, and the doctor gave me Valium for a week, and I was able to sleep, and that was it. After a week, I was fine. So, and with benzos, I was screwed. So we're all different. The way that our brain works is different, and I assume that the way that our benzo receptors or sertraline receptors or serotonin receptors change is also different between each other. Now, some like I said, even if it was ethically possible, by the way, not that I'm thinking that experimental on monkeys is ethically irresponsible, in any way, but that's our world, unfortunately. Even if it was possible to cut a man's brain while he's alive and let him take a benzo and then we'd somehow look into his GABA receptor and somehow see what's happening, at what time would you look? Diazepam is a different way that it works in the concentration in the blood or in the receptor than other benzos. Where would you look? Like there's receptors everywhere in the body. What if one has been on benzos for 3 months already, or 6 months, or 30 years, and his receptors look different for the someone who's been on it for a month or some other time period? Every time I suspect the results will be a bit different. So lastly, okay, I'll give a little bit, this is not scripted, but I'll give a little bit of context. One of the problems that I had, and the reason why I was so frustrated, like with my own symptoms, and a lot of people come to me and say, like, in tears, that they don't want to taper for 4 years, and my system shows that the jump dose would be in 4 years or something like that. Is that tail that he talks about also in his lectures, that the exponential tapering and his tapering method, the hyperbolic tapering that he mentions, are so similar, but the end, because the tail is so long with exponential, it just becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. It doesn't take into account the jump doses. I don't know why. Probably I don't understand why it doesn't even mention it. But there are jump doses, so it's not to infinity. There is a stop condition, as we say in computer science. Basically, you have a place where you basically say, this is not going to be an infinite loop. This is the value where you jump. Okay, you stop taking the drug. He talks about it, and he basically says, if you look at the receptor occupancy, that at the very end, it goes, he actually cuts more and more in percentage points. I did the calculation, I put it on the screen. In reality, right, I befriended a lot of people that are tapering diazepam, for example. And they all get stuck, not all of them, but a lot of them get stuck on that last milligram. So the last few milligrams of diazepam are very difficult to cut. Even and especially if you go through his table, he's just going, like, I think in the smallest one is just 0.1, in the very slowest one, but in the moderate one is even less, and it's like 0.50. that bit between, I say 2 milligram of diazepam or 3 to 0, in reality, people get stuck there. And that's why the tail is not so bad, in fact. Yes, it's very annoying that the taper is very long. It's very depressing, but that's just how it is. Like, a lot of people find it difficult at the end. I did a taper. I was very, very fast during the end because I found the things that helped me. We'll get to that soon in the CBD section that he dismisses for some reason. But I was able to taper faster, but I didn't stop doing it exponentially. I would basically just cut every 5 days instead of, say, every 20. And that's how I got to the end. Got to the jump dose of 0.025. I think it was close to that. It was 0.027 or something. And I just stopped taking it. I had a week of maybe a little bit more anxiety compared to like a normal person, not even like a benzo person. And that was it. And after that, I was fine. If I have any symptoms or something like that, after that, I don't know about them. Maybe some things that I, suspect, like, some allergy, like kind of like a reaction to cold that is a bit weird. But I don't think that, I don't know. I don't think it's a benzo. I'm eating MSG like crazy. I'm basically living like a normal person now, and there's no problem. So yeah, I do think that it was important that I did it. I still kept it exponential despite me basically having no withdrawal symptoms. So once I started taking Stabilum and CBD on top of everything else that I was taking. A person starts a taper. He has no milligram scale. He follows the moderate table. He thinks that he's like, should stay at the moderate table, and maybe if he's better, you'll go to the fast table after that. He sees up to 2.5%. So you might assume that the cuts are close to 2%, but I showed that it's going all over the place. So in here, the first cut, like we'll take clonazepam, for example, is 1.2%. That person might not even feel the cut, right? And he will continue more and more, but suddenly symptoms will arise because he's going faster and faster. In reality, it's linear up to a certain threshold that Mark created, and then they're getting worse, and he wants to microtaper maybe to do cut slower, but he has no means to do so accurately because he doesn't have the scale. So as the pill is small and he can't break it accurately anymore, he just continues the way he does. Now there's waves in his plasma. If he tries to cut it by the eye, it won't be accurate at all, and then he would create waves in the plasma. There's already waves. Now, worse, the difference between the PM and AM that I mentioned that randomly happen makes him feel really bad during the night, but better during the day. He doesn't understand what's happening, but he doesn't know what to do. And then he might be able to go over the hurdle of the 2.8% RO cut. And now he's suddenly again cutting smaller ROs percentages again, right? There is a good chance that suddenly he won't have side effects, or at least not as severe. He might think that he should move to the slower taper plan because this doesn't make sense to him at all, the way that he feels, when in fact there was no problem if he stayed at, say, 1.5 RO cuts where he had minimal side effects, but still felt good enough about, to be functional and feeling good about his progress also in terms of speed. He has no real control over the taper other than how many weeks he waited between cuts. That's the only way that you can control it somehow. It's really no better than an Ashton manual taper, I'm sorry. So another subject that is completely abandoned, completely. I didn't see anything about it in the book. If I'm wrong, please correct me, because it's really weird that it's not there. Is MCAS syndrome, or histamine intolerance, basically due to benzo withdrawal. So luckily I wasn't affected by it too much or at all. I did develop, after I finished, like I said, the very sensitivity to cold, and would develop what I can only describe as an allergic reaction when the temperature would drop too much. So I would sneeze a lot and get congested, and my eyes would be foggy and teary. And I can't say for sure if it has to do with my taper. But histamine intolerance is a real problem, especially for foods that you eat for many people. So they need to eat a diet that is low in histamines, basically. And Mark does indicate in the book that benzos are mast cell stabilizers in the way that he describes this drug. But I could not find once a mention of the word MCAS or all the histamine searches, basically, because when I did a histamine search, it would lead me to specific drugs that attach to the histamine receptors by the way that they work, rather than this topic. Yeah, this is very important. I'm very surprised that it's not in the book. And the last but not least section that I want to talk about, that I found extremely disappointing from my perspective, is the subject of supplements. And I don't understand why this chapter or paragraph is so short. This is maybe one of the most anxiety-inducing part of benzo withdrawal, the amount of misinformation that exists on supplements, as if every supplement in the world is the same. There are mentions like alcohol and caffeine that are consensus that should be 100% avoided. But alcohol, being the worst offender, should have been given a more serious warning, I think, compared to the other everyday substances. Okay, he includes it with, for some reason, with phenibut and valerian, two very different substances, and CBD, which is also again completely different. And I wouldn't call phenibut a supplement; it's a full-on substance. I think of abuse, from my understanding, like you can get addicted to it. This section should have been way bigger and not ignored. But of course, only if true helpful information was included. Things like glutamate-rich foods, for example, should have been explored. Maybe a diet section. I avoided MSG and even gluten at some point. I don't know how much that affects or doesn't affect, but there are people that say that they're very sensitive to MSG. MSG is free glutamate, basically, as well as mushrooms and tomatoes that try to take less because they're full of glutamate. I don't know if that's a good advice, to be honest. Glutamate and GABA change into each other in the brain all the time. So even if you take more glutamate, it might change. But like I said, I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know enough about that. But I would imagine that in a book like that would be mentioned. Anecdotal evidence, like I said, showed that MSG does create issues for a lot of people. Why does he say that there's no studies? Why? Cannabinoids specifically has many studies, one specific for benzo withdrawal and specifically CBD oil. He also says that, let's talk about CBD oil and cannabinoids for a second. That's the most important thing that I wanted to mention, to be honest. Like I said, I was helped by that, okay? I know that some people have a problem with THC, but cannabinoids, which are the chemicals in cannabis plant that cause drug-like effects in the body. I'm basically quoting a website dedicated to this topic, a scientific website, including the central nervous system and the immune system. Over 100 cannabinoids have been found in cannabis. The main psychoactive cannabinoid in cannabis is delta-9 THC, the one that makes us feel high, right? CBD is not addictive at all. And THC can cause dependency, but in a much smaller percentage of the population than benzos. And I saw I think in one video it was, they mentioned 14% as the amount. And that is mostly linked, that is for people that smoke weed. That's not cannabis, like medicinal cannabis. Smoking weed is different. That's marijuana. So there's two types of, there's hemp, and there's that people use CBD oil from, create CBD oil from, and there's the marijuana plant, which may be used for to create THC pure formulas of the oil, but I'm not 100% sure. What I know is that it's mostly linked to smoking weed, which gives you a huge amount of THC. And it's not the plant CBD oil, for example, is made of, like I said, it's made from hemp. Other cannabinoids like CBN, which is HTC, are not psychoactive, and all indications show that it doesn't cause dependency. Also, by the way, there's glycine receptors that are part of this system that, from my understanding, work just like the GABA receptors in the way that they calm the body. This is why I still put a few grams of glycine, which is an amino acid, guys, that sweetens my yogurts, snacks all the time. Stabilum that I take does have a similar thing, and it actually has a study about it too, which I need to read. But I only found out what they are today, unfortunately. It was used by my psychiatrist mom since the 90s to replace SSRIs for her patients and help them taper them off. So, and it works really, really well. And when starting them to avoid withdrawal effects, it's also very beneficial. In the Israeli website, which I'm going to link here, it actually indicates for help with quitting sleeping pills like benzos and Z drugs. So it's amazing me that not more people know about it, to be honest. It's amazing that I'm the first person who actually mentions it. Now, this brings me to the other lecture Mark gave to the Australian Society for Psychological Medicine. When I asked in the chat of this lecture why he is against CBD, I was on the team meeting call for this lecture, and it seems I was not the only one who asked about it. He gave a completely different answer from the book, saying that it is his belief that the replacing of one drug with another is not wise.
And sorry, one other sort of pharmacological kind of question is a couple of people early on were asking about using, medicinal cannabis products to help people cope with withdrawal symptoms, such as CBD oil. And the guidelines, I believe, recommends against that. Just wondering if you're willing to comment on that.
So I can't say I'm very familiar with those products, but my general approach is if you take another drug that conceals withdrawal symptoms, what you'll end up doing is switching drugs, not stopping drugs. So it's a bit like if you're quitting whiskey but you're drinking wine, so you're going to end up dependent on the other drug. So sometimes people are given benzodiazepines to get through withdrawal from antidepressants, and they end up dependent on benzodiazepines. I think as a one-off, in an extreme moment, that might be useful, but in general, if that's the approach taken, you end up switching. I think withdrawal symptoms are a very important feedback from the brain saying this reduction is going too quickly. And so rather than concealing them with another drug, I think it's better to take the feedback and go more slowly.
This is also what he wrote to me as one of his last messages when I told him that I'm starting the CBD. And when I asked him why does he say that it's not wise to replace, to replace this with another drug, he didn't reply. I actually asked him a few times for his reply. He never answered. So I'll tell you why I think it's completely wrong to say that symptoms have to be endured, right? People that suffer from alcohol dependency go to rehab, right? Detox, basically. And they are given Valium for a week while they detox to avoid the worst of the symptoms without developing dependency, hopefully, for the diazepam that they take, because it's only for a week. And they still heal. This is something that I'm not fully immersed in, so I can't say this for sure. But that's what many people in NA, my life lived well coach that I had, that they deal with this kind of thing all the time, and others told me. It's the same with congestion medicine. Even if certain strong nasal sprays, they can create a problem where basically if you use them more than 3 days, you become sort of addicted or dependent, like you would say about benzos, right? But if you take them less than 3 days, they would not cause dependency, right? And it will help you minimize the horrible stuffy nose symptom that you get. So the body knows how to heal himself. Even, if you think that it doesn't need you to know how it does it just do it. The symptoms are there because A, sometimes you just get symptoms, and B, because the body, tells you that something is wrong, but something is wrong, and you can switch that notification alert off without the body stopping, his internal healing mechanism, right? So if you can take something or do something to help you avoid the more than 150 symptoms of psychiatric drug withdrawal, even more probably, then it's a good thing. Even if it took you 10% or 20% more time to properly heal, as in like your receptors become young and beautiful again, and like everything is fine. If you don't have thoughts about unaliving yourself every day, or horrible depression, or pain all over your body, or anxiety that you get into panic attacks, that's worth it, in my opinion. I mean, people even talk about taking magnesium as something that can delay healing. Basically, I saw it in the beating benzo group, something that Rosalind keeps saying. If I feel better and I sleep better, isn't it worth it? I don't even mention the most important thing. Unlike antidepressants that are given like candies, as Mark himself states in his book, right? Benzos are now highly regulated, and many people find themselves fighting to even get a script from doctors who don't understand what they're doing by cold turkeying or enforcing a short taper on their patients, or basically just a doctor retiring and the new doctor doesn't want to get involved in this because he knows how difficult this could be, which I think is highly unethical, but that's the reality, unfortunately. If there's an easy way to replace that drug with a drug that doesn't require a script, right, or doesn't have that kind of level of government and Big Brother intervention, like CBD oil in Australia at least, as he mentions, which I don't agree from personal use that it's replacement, because it doesn't create dependence. CBD does not create dependence. Why not use it? Dependency on your doctor is basically dependency on your drug dealer in these days. In Queensland, there is a big brother. I'll give you an example. In Queensland, there is a big brother system that supervises doctors giving drug like Benzo, which is called Q-Script. And if they decide that this doctor did the wrong thing or gave too much, or if there's a complaint about them, they'll just take away his privilege to issue the scripts of benzos or any other drugs like this. Okay? So suddenly you are out of supply. Your drug dealer is no longer in the neighborhood, right? And you might be cold turkeyed, right? That's by the way, this system also follows you as the drug taker. And so if they put like a mention that your drug, like going to different doctors and trying to get this drug, you might be blocked from even getting a script from any doctor. That's really scary, and that's something that should be avoided. And so you want to taper as fast as possible, and with no issues, so that you won't be in a position where you're dependent on anybody. Yeah, so I can get, like I said, a CBD or THC script for any doctor in Australia, and free or paid telehealth clinics with doctors and nurses give a script without a problem. It's much more expensive, so it's about $150 for the CBD that I'm taking for a bottle right now that lasts me 2 months, compared to $15, $13.40, in fact, for 100 pills of clonazepam 2 milligram. Okay, but it's worth it. It's much more expensive, but it's worth it because I'm not dependent on anybody. And in the US, you could just get. I have a problem with that because I think it should be medicinal and tested, but you can buy CBD gummies in a supermarket if you want to. I want to make this very clear that every supplements that do work on the GABA receptors are not all the same as well. So most of them are very mild, like the valerian you mentioned, but also just drinking chamomile tea. And also, unlike the benzo, most do not attach to the BNZ. I think none of them is attached to the BNZ site. BNZ site is called BNZ site for benzos on the GABA receptor. I might be completely wrong about that. Please comment and correct me if I'm wrong. There's no, from my understanding, any study that I'm aware of that shows that using supplements that touch the GABA system affect or delay basically the healing from benzo withdrawal. Some people do get very bad reactions though, and I assume those are people that are very sensitive to anything. Even food can throw them into severe withdrawals. But I don't know enough about that, to be honest. And I always tell people that I start your supplement, start very low and go slow. Just like what they say with the CBD oil, all the doctors say, start low and go slow. You basically are looking for an amount that will help you. I also believe that some are so low in certain amino acids because antidepressants and benzodiazepines actually deplete you from a lot of them, like amino acids and vitamins. So amino acids like magnesium that are basically essential for repairing the brain and for the brain function and are involved in so many things in the body and the brain, they started to take a big dose of basically when you don't have anything in your body will cause a reaction, probably. Similar to how you can't feed a man who was starving for a very long time with a big complex meal, as it can literally kill them. I know this from studying about the Holocaust as a Jewish person. They tell you that the people that survived the death, the death walks and things like that, they were so malnourished. And unfortunately, some good intentions, like people with good intentions, nurses and things like that, gave them a big meal to compensate for what they didn't have, and they died from that because they didn't have the capacity to absorb or just digest their food. You have to start very low and very slow, get the system ready again with about using certain things, and with magnesium you basically just have to start very low. So again, many people that I talked to, for example, took magnesium glycinate during their taper, including some famous benzo personalities in our community. I'm not going to mention them because I didn't ask for their permission to be named, but people that you know very well if you are in the benzo community. There are different types of B vitamins also. For example, B vitamin B12 comes in a few forms, and one of them does not cause reaction in benzo withdrawal, according to anecdotal evidence. That's why people use it. So please watch my supplements and sleep tips video for more information about that. Now, the last bit is more of like a thought rather than criticism. With the ADs, agomelatine is not supposed to cause dependency. So why is it really there? He is indicated in the severity. It is there indicated in the severity of withdrawals table for ADs as the easiest one to come off. I have lived experience with agomelatine, as I described in my story part 1 video. And when I came off it, it was supposed to be easy. And the doctor said I should come off easily just by cold turkeying it. In reality, I became depressed, but I had every reason to be back then. And also had anxiety already. So it didn't help with the anxiety as much. That's what started this whole problem. So that could be a withdrawal effect or simply a relapse. He talks about it in the book as well, of course. But given that the half-life is so short, right? And the completely different pathway the drug uses, I doubt it. I actually think that it doesn't have any withdrawal symptoms, from my understanding. It's supposed to not have, by the way, that's important, it's supposed to not have side effects either. And my thought is that it potentially can help people coming off psychiatric drugs in the sleep department, so if they can't sleep. While I took a small dose when I was trying to sleep and couldn't in the first 6 days that I described in part 1 of my story, it didn't help me, but I took half the dose that I normally take. I normally took 50, but I was so scared of everything by then that I was just too scared to take 50. I don't know, like I should have tried, but I was in terror and in anxiety. And when I took it before my benzo story, the reason why I was thinking about it was that the first night that I took it, I slept for 8 hours straight without waking up once. And that's something that I don't think ever happened to me, and definitely not in my adult life. So it's worth a mention. So, summary. So this is my review of this book and his work. I would really like to hear your thoughts about this. Please leave a comment, and I would be very happy to also hear from Mark, his response to these things that I've mentioned. And given the many issues with this book, unfortunately, I was actually coming to this review saying that I do recommend buying it just for the sake of all the studies, but it's hard for me to know what's right or wrong there. I didn't even scratch the surface, and I didn't read it and criticize every reference or anything like that. That would take me weeks and months. It still took me 3 weeks or 4 to make this video, so and script it all. So given those issues now that I see, I unfortunately not 100% sure that I can rely on everything that says there. I think that this book should be, proofread or peer-reviewed, and it should be rewritten in a way that covers all those topics that I said and fixes those tapering tables. And I would actually like very much for a way to cooperate with Mark and other taper coaches and everyone to use my tool. I was actually trying to using his RO percentage points to create to use my tool to change it from exponential to his system, but with everything that I just said, the tail being not exactly correct, from anecdotal evidence with people, the fast end of his hyperbolic taper, the references that are not always completely understand. Like, I don't know, there's all sorts of weird problems that if someone read it a few times like I did from a critical point of view and tried to fix those things, it would have been so much better. So once this is fixed, maybe that would be good. But again, also with the RO, I'm not sure that it's like I said, it's a very accurate way to measure. We are not baboons. We are not very different from each other. I think that the way that I do it in my Excel sheet or Google Sheets actually is so much better. You just control your taper. You are in control. So basically, you cut. You see if you're going well, you cut a little bit more exponentially, the way that people did, all the time, using the system that everyone's recommended. You just have a very easy tool to do it rather than having like notebook and a Casio calculator and trying to figure it out yourself. And then just, if you had a cut that didn't agree with you, you wait a little bit, you maybe take some of the supplements that I mentioned, and you wait it out, and then you do a smaller cut, and so on and so forth. So you go the way that, the fastest way that you can without losing your quality of life to a degree that you can tolerate. So that's the most important thing, I think. So the only difference basically that I would basically do maybe in my taper is basically and I do that, by the way, in some of the tables you'll see that I'm going faster the lower I go. Just go faster. After 3 milligrams, go a bit faster with the cuts, but not to the level that he does, like 33% or 20% difference between different cuts. Go like much slower because, like I said, it just doesn't. Evidence shows that the end is difficult to some people, and you need to go slower and slower even at the end. So that's all. I hope that you enjoyed this review. If this review makes you feel any bad feelings, or if you're in withdrawal, you're basically using the book and you're a bit scared, please contact me. I'm very happy to help people. I'm doing it for a very cheap rate when it comes to creating a full taper and holding people's hand virtually and telling them what to do. And I'm very available. I'm trying to answer anybody within hours if I don't sleep. I'm in Australia, so I'm on the other side of the world. But and I do it also for free for people that are talk to me, like sometimes hours on hours, and we're just like, we're Benzo buddies. I've been through this, so I'm very happy to help. So yeah, that's it. Like I said, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next video.